If you would keep me company while I unstopper this cruel little bottle of truth, lay your finger upon the bell and subscribe. A darkroom is safer when there are witnesses listening for the whistle of steam, for the soft click of a lens cap, for the things we tell ourselves are tricks. I have had too many nights alone with the plates. Be present. Stay. You will hear it said that the dead can blink, that a child fixed upon a glass plate in 1887 can let the lid flicker once, and only once, when the lamplight stutters and the viewer's breath fogs the varnish. I will tell you from the start because I want no false comfort tucked under your pillow. The dead do not blink, not here, not as photographs. What blinks is you. What blinks is the world reflected in the film of silver. Yet if I end there I am a coward. So let me begin where those with good sense end, which is to say at the stink and ache of process, and at the moment we first laid the child upon the ghost chair. I must place the year, though my ledger's edges are feathered where I tore out pages, and I am not certain whether frost had flecked the studio skylight before or after the mother came. We were wet plate men in a year that had no right to be. Gelatin dry plates were already marching with their clean little boxes, their convenience and their disrespect for ritual, but Mr. Finch felt the old way kept a studio honest. Ether sour collodion in its small-necked bottle, the lemon reek of acetic acid, the metallic breath of silver nitrate when you open the bath and the moonlight in your nails turns them ghost. If I close my eyes I am standing again among the head supports that look like iron question marks, their velvet saddles blackening with damp hair. On Tuesdays we allowed the sewing girls from the drapery to stand before the painted woodland. On Thursdays it was children. The Tuesdays haunt me less. The child I speak of, she was 6 or possibly 7. Her name is not to be written here. Her hair was the pale brown of cheap broom straw, cut bluntly by grief. I am certain of the head rest shadow on her collarbone, I would swear to it. Her mother's gloves were gray kid, no, black, tight, not to be removed even in the heat of the lamps. We placed the ghost chair in front of the gray drop because the rural scene with its foolish swan would make a mockery of a morning photograph, and the mother had asked for the black gauze veil pinned behind her daughter's head as if the air itself would cradle what could no longer be held. I remember the obturator in my hand, my fingers call it that, though really it was only the velvet cap that Mr. Finch lifted and replaced with the deliberation of a man performing a blessing. The head support's metal prong, curved like a shepherd's crook, pressed between the child's shoulder blades, almost kindly. The mother did not weep. She made the mouth of a woman tasting the bitter almond of cyanide, though of course we kept that in a stoppered jar in the darkroom and never near the sitters. The child was already past blinking. I will not dignify the rumors that we sometimes fixed the eyelids with gum. Children who have time to die quietly rarely need our help in sleeping. We incline the chin with the wooden fork, we put the small hands in her lap with the little white book because people like to see their children with small white books. And Mr. Finch gave me that look over the rim of his pince-nez that means don't fuss the head rest again, you are making it show in the shadow. I must have shaken the plate. I must have. When I remember dipping the clean glass into the collodion, I can feel the pucker where the pour tore a curl across the lower right, a slow snake of syrup pooling near the corner. The collodion stung my cuticles. I watched it set, watched it skin, and then I took the plate to the silver bath. The glass went from amber to nothing as the iodides kissed the nitrate, and the first whisper rose, the one you always think is a draft until you notice that it occurs only when you agitate the tray, little consonants made by fluid moving in tight corners. I do not write that to be fanciful. The hyposulfite later talks in a different register, a thinner falsetto that makes one think of pins dropped off a desk. The silver bath is the one that murmurs like a child trying to be good. I do not say it said my name that day. I'm not yet that far gone in my guilt. 7 seconds, Mr. Finch had said. Or perhaps 9. The index and ring fingers on his right hand are smooth as ivory from years of pinching and sliding the cap. When he exhales on a plate there is no fogging. I tell you this because it matters, because men become their tools, and I can recite the movements back to you in my wrist if my tongue cannot keep the order. The lens we used then was the Dallmeyer with the fine brass barrel that records itself inside every sitter's eye if you look tiny enough at the catchlight. The cap off, breath kept. 1, 2, 3, I saw a fly alight on the child's cheek and thought of shooing it and did not. For 5, the mother made a noise like a faked cough. 6, the door hinge whispered in the next room. 7, cap on and the room released its air. You think that is the stillness of death you smell after an exposure. It is only your blood. I carried the plate back, my thumb on the edge, counting the steps from habit, because in wet plate work each step is a seam between ruin and the thing that will outlast you. I cannot swear whether I flared the lamp too high in the darkroom or whether the flame guttered then and the bowl passed at that exact moment from red to a lower orange. I had the developer, iron sulfate and acetic acid dark as tea ready. I poured across the plate with the kindness of a man washing a sleeping infant, and the forehead rose, then the hair, then the little paper book in her lap. The eyes are always slow. They come like wells, reflecting before they show depth. I bent to the tray and found my own presentiment looking back at me there in the first raw silver, my own lamp doubled and tiny in each of her pupils. The catchlight in the left eye was a little too far from the edge. That is how I knew the cap had gone on, not with the smoothness of a prayer but with a slight tremble. The tiniest double, a ghost of the highlight, floated 0.5 millimeter to one side. A scribe's error, easily corrected later with pencil, and yet I could not leave it alone. The mother asked if she might see before fixing. I am ashamed of how quickly, how nearly greedily, I told her no. When you have been long with the irons and the quickness, you think of the unfixed image as a living thing and you guard it. I moved her back, whispered, there is nothing yet you would wish to see, let me fix it, let me make it safe. She murmured something to the effect that safety is not a condition the world affords a mother. I may be sharpening her phrasing. We were not yet in the habit of admitting thought into the studio. Fixer turns what is suggestion into what is law. We used hyposulfite, sodium thiosulfate, mostly in that year because the cyanide had taken a boy 2 streets over who thought he could cure a tooth with whiskey and a pinch of recklessness. I poured. The image went through its soft death in the bath. The black becomes blacker under hypo, the hazes are marched away, and then what you have is no longer negotiable. I rinsed. The collodion smelled of a mortuary's sickly bouquet. I do not know why I remember that. I slid the plate into the rack and her eyes followed me while not yet dry. There, I have done it. I have used the phrase. They followed me. I watched the double catchlight and told myself it was a trick of the angle between the lamp in my head and the tiny bright ring in the pupil. Metal reflecting metal. You must understand, the sheen on a wet plate is not like paper. It has the oily asphalt depth of a roadway after rain. When you tilt it, everything slides. But I had not yet varnished, and still the sensation pursued me. This is where the rumor begins, not in the viewing but in the making. The maker feels seen. Mr. Finch stood beside me and said, very low, the light will hit that pupilling wrong on the print. We will have to put the highlight back with a little soft graphite. I can do it or you can. The war of pride that wages when a master offers an apprentice a pencil. I said I would do it. He nodded, touched the plate's edge with a forefinger, found it tacky, and said wait until it is bone dry before you varnish. I said yes and left a finger mark anyway later and wept over it like a fool. I am telling you more of me than I should, but it is all part of it. The eyelid did not move. I did. The mother returned the following afternoon wearing the same dress, or one I thought so until I saw the seam had split and been resewn in haste. She had with her a neighbor, a quiet optician named Mr. Rook, if memory does not lie outright. I would like to say I invited him to dispel nonsense to keep the studio honest, but I think the mother brought him because grief breeds its own accountability. She had heard, perhaps while standing in the street, hands clasped under shawl, that there was a rumor. Someone had said that a child's eyes open if you ask them to. And because I was weak I did not order her away but instead made coffee and laid the print on the copying table and tipped the lamp lower. We had printed that morning. Albumen paper, glazed with the whip of wasted egg whites and salted and dried, then floated on the silver nitrate until the paper shone with the quiet threat of a clean razor. We contact printed the glass upon it in the frame in the skylight, watching as the faint image walked up out of nothing, turning brown as bread. A long time, the winter sun was fatal to business. When I thought the depth sufficient, I brought it back inside, washed, and toned in gold chloride until the child's mouth lost its rude wet look and became something more severe. Fixing in hypo again, washing in 6 waters, the paper squeaking horribly when you change it, a sound like a mouse in a drawer. I dried it under pressure to give it a good gloss. And then I did what anyone would do with a child's eye that does not sit where it should. I took the retouching pencil, a soft stub of graphite held like a penknife, and I suggested a new highlight and a clean edge to the lid. The line I drew would become, in time and angle, the act of blinking. I did not know that then. If I had, I would have botched it on purpose to spare myself the next month. The optician approached the print before the mother dared. He was a shy man, with a fumbling habit of setting and resetting spectacles upon the bridge of his nose as if he feared to look too directly at anything. He asked if he might examine the negative and I brought it. He turned it under the lamp, and the tiny bright rings in the child's eyes showed there, a twin of each lamp, because the cap had trembled when it went back on, giving us 2 exposures so close that only the highlights refused to choose. He grunted once, a mild noise that I think was respect. He asked me whether we had a second exposure, a deliberate one, and I said no. He asked about the shutter. I said cap. He said ah. He put the glass back in my hand and said quietly to the mother, there is no life here to catch you, no hidden motion preserved. You will see things when you angle it because we have engineered it to do so. She said nothing, only put her gloved finger upon the child's paper cheek once, exactly once, and then drew it back as if burned. I tilted the print to show them. This is where it happens, this is where the myth puts out new roots without our consent. The whites of the eyes are not white, they are the high point of the albumin gloss, and the gloss is a mirror for the room. When you tip the print toward the lamp, the black of the pupil, deepest deposit of silver, catches a gray-blue sheen we call silvering, a little patrimony of our ruin, and it will look like a film across the iris. If you drew your pencil too firm on the lid, if you burnish the paper when dry, any of these sins, you have made planes, you have made angles in the emulsion that prefer one direction of light. The catch light drawn in with graphite catches actual light and throws it like a knife. The original tiny lens sparkle sinks. Tilt left and the drawn line flashes, making the upper lid appear to slide a fraction lower. Tilt right, and the sheen slides toward the pupil and the drawn catch light dies. Flicker the flame and the two states alternate. That is blinking. Not the dead. You are the eyelid of the world. Do I sound as if I was triumphant? I was at first, because one wishes to be the man who solves a fear with a phrase. I laid the print upright and the child's gaze steadied as it should. The mother put a hand to her throat and said, as if stating the time, my daughter's eye follows me. The optician, patient as a bench lathe, nudged the lamp again and showed the shift, and said it was our fault and the fault of the albumin. And then, because he was kind, he added that fault was perhaps always an unkind word to apply to anything that held memory. I took the print from the table and put it under glass. Glass makes the trick worse, especially if you are a pauper like me and choose whatever plate Mr. Finch had not yet sent to the glazier. Our glass had a faint wave from the draw. Those little bulges, those sighing ripples, many will tell you that they are the signature of authenticity. I tell you that they are mischief. They take the silvering and multiply it. Now, when the mother shifted her weight, barely like a toe feeling for a stair, the lids did not move, I promise you they did not, but the white took a glow at the lower rim and the graphite at the upper flashed like a thought. Her breath left her. I removed the frame and put the print back on the table and sat down hard. There is a moment in each studio day when you know you are unclean. It is never when you spill the hypo on your cuffs, or when you scrape a child's tooth from a varnish film and flick it into the bin. It is the moment you show a trick to a person and see them decide to believe it and need you to deny it in the same heartbeat. The mother's face in that room is my penance. You would think we stopped there. But once you show a person how a lens coughs up two little suns when your hand shakes, and how a pencil line can become an eyelid's runnel, they will ask you at once to do it again. She asked to see other children. I fetched 3. One had the iron-pronged shadow spread behind his ear like a broken wing. One had the support of a hidden mother in black behind the chair, a hand gloved and erased badly, fingers like pale sausages where the retoucher had given up. One had been living, he would not abide 9 seconds. His head turned just before the cap returned, and his hair made motion like water. In all 3 their eyes had been injured by men like me, graphite sharpening what was dull. In all 3 when you tipped the print so the lamplight scraped across the gloss, the eyelids made small betrayals that looked like life. I said, do you see? She said she saw. But what she saw is not what I showed her, and I cannot go back and will not pretend otherwise. In the nights that followed I did what I swore when I was apprenticed I would never do. I made experiments with a child's face for no purpose but to coax an effect. The optician brought me small beveled mirrors and a glass with a thicker crown in the center, and he stood at my bench and spoke of angles as if they were candles. If a varnish film is too thick, he said, it will craze under heat and form a shallow relief. Your burnisher makes low hills and valleys. A graphite line on such a slope is visible only when the lamp calls it by name. A paper under glass with a wave will host a march of chiaroscuro across your pupil like a parade. He smiled then did not. Forgive me, he said to the mother. Forgive the men who make things. We do not know what we enlarge. We made a second print from the plate and did not touch the eyes. I show you that I wish to be clean. We made a third and I drew only the catchlight, 1 grain of graphite under a hairline eraser, no more. On the 4th, reckless, I darkened the upper lid to the point of sin, and on the 5th I scraped the negative itself with a needle to carve a slit where none had existed. Each was an education in the capabilities of a small wicked movement of the wrist. Under steady gaslight they all looked stable enough, harmless as water. Under the lamp when a draft came through the floorboards, when the flame shook and the room leaned, they rewarded that tremor with a performance. That is how I learned that my hand with the cap is the arbiter of all of this. A double exposure so small your heart would beat through it without noticing can make a glimmer in the pupil that cannot be exorcised by eraser. I have not told you the best part. There is a thing albumin prints do when they are kept under glass for the length of a sorrow. Where the blacks grow richest, a bloom forms, a silver mirror that has nothing to do with the optician's glass and everything to do with the atoms of our sin. It creeps at the edges like frost. Under certain slants it is blue as the bruised sky after hail. This animal climbs first upon the eyes, because our eyes are wells where the exposure drank deepest. It came upon that child within a week, perhaps because the mother held it too near to her breath. When she returned with the frame, she had slept with it, she said, and then corrected herself to say lived with it, because people who have lost what she has lost choose their verbs the way an undertaker chooses ribbons. I saw that the whites were fretted with a metallic sheen. Tilt and the sheen goes left, tilt back and it goes right, netting the pupil with a film like frog's pond that one instantly calls lid. I should have snatched the frame and told her to take it out of the damp. I should have told her that every breath is silver's enemy, that the paper is not a lung but a field, and that we trample it every time we love it too hard. Instead, fool that I am, I told her that I could show her the trick's engine. The optician put his gentle hands on the back of mine to stop me and I shook him off like one shakes a fly. I wanted to show off in the darkroom my competency at the altar. Come and watch, I said to her. See that it is only light. So I made a little theater. I took a scrap of black velvet and pinned it to the wall opposite the developing bench. I hung the girls' print there naked, no glass. I lit the ruby lamp low and then doused it entirely and worked by memory because I wanted the last to be in the dark. At my elbow the Mr. Finch's fixer bath chuckled in its hush. Water was somewhere dripping. That sound becomes the measure of your heart. I trimmed a wick on the little table lamp with the wrinkled brass shade, and I said to them, watch me make her blink with my hand alone. I must have smiled. I hate that I might have smiled. From under the bench I took the mirror the optician had lent me, the one he had silvered himself by pouring mercury over glass in the manner that makes his shop smell ghostly. It held a wavering boat of my face. I set it on a stack of ledger books at an angle, so that the lamp's light could be thrown not at the girl but sideways across her eyes. I held my palm in front of the shade and spread my fingers slowly as a conjurer. On her face, the white shone and dimmed, not as if a lid were moving, no, nothing so gross as a shadow, but as if the glisten itself took breath. There, I said to her mother, do you see the replacement of the drawn catchlight by the true? Where the graphite distracts and then the original returns. She hissed and I thought I had hurt her. It was only the noise grief makes when it recognizes a home. I moved my hand again and the room made a small complaining sound. Not the fixer sings in a thin key. This was the sound the silver bath makes when the breeze finds its skin, the faintest of ripples. I thought then that I had not closed the door fully. I did not remember whether the gas was lit in the front room. I did not remember whether we had restocked cyanide last week or only willed it. I wanted very badly to go back and be sweeping the floor on Tuesday, not being clever. I wanted to be a person who does not tilt glass toward a grieving woman so that she can see what she cannot unsee. The optician put his fingers to his mouth, pinching a little bead of lip between forefinger and thumb as if he had been burned. I moved my hand again and at the same moment the mother stepped left and then back right with the hesitance of one avoiding a child asleep on the floor. In that narrow motion we ferried the light across the gloss twice fast, and the room decided to lie. If you flick a gloss and do not warn the brain, it will insist on motion. The child's lid fell and rose. Of course it did not, of course it did not. Even as she said there you see it, I went to my own chest and pressed hard as if to quiet an insect there that had woken. The darkroom deepened, the hinge creaked again, the mirror returned someone else's mouth and I did not like its kindness. I laughed then, but the laugh fell into the dark like a coin into the sea. In the sound the bath answered in its wet language. A voice heard through glass sounds like your own heard under a lake. We made her blink again. No, I will not make language tidy here. We did it again and again. Each time I told myself this is only a condition we have created. Each time the mother told the air thank you, and each time the optician, though he spoke no prayer, drew his shoulders in as if cold had taken him by the organs. I kept the lamp's feed low but the flame kept finding a way to widen and brighten at the edges like a lid not snug upon its jar. If you have ever watched an exposure come up on a plate, you know that feeling of running ahead of yourself and then having to content yourself with the pace of silver. This was the reverse. I tried to slow the world and found it drawing me forward. If you are expecting now the noise, the drop, the crash, you have mistaken the century. We did not leap or cry. The most frightening thing in a darkroom is when it approves of you. The mirror sent the light past my hand when I had not moved it, or perhaps it was the lame hinge, I do not say, but the child's eye in the albumen found a way to go from pupil to gloss and back without help. The mother sank so slowly I would swear she did not move at all, but one moment she was standing with her gloves like fists and the next moment she was sitting on the stool whose rush seat we never varnished because of superstition. Her veil, unpinned, sank against her throat as if the humidity had found its proof. The optician, whose spectacles had slipped down his nose so often that they had worn a little trench in the skin, took them off entirely and watched without lenses, which is I think the kindest way. It seems I shouted toward the front room for Mr. Finch, but I have no memory of having lungs then. I turned the lamp up fully, 2/3 of the wick, the way the pamphlet tells you never to do in rooms where ether has ever stood open. My courage is cheap, I grant you. Under full flame the gloss of albumen grows no kinder. The entire room was written in the child's eyes, the ceiling's double lines printed on her pupils as if with a printing press, the lamp a white kernel, my head a shadow that blackened and then ebbed with my pulse. I set my hand upon the bench to steady myself and felt damp. I said quite practical things like the plate is sweating. The optician said quite practical it is not, it is you. I offered the mother the dullest of apologies, the sort you give a person when you have no apology that can be received. She set the frame upright herself. She was very steady then. She asked to be allowed to sit with her daughter and the lamp alone for a minute. And now I must tell you what I did when a woman asked to be alone in my darkroom with a print that had just performed or been made to perform wickedness. I left her. We were not wise men. This is the part one remember least properly. I stood in the doorway to the front room thinking about Mr. Finch's ledger and whether I should charge for the extra prints or call them my own error and offer them without payment. I thought about whether the optician would forgive me for making his work an accomplice to superstition. In that pause it is possible I heard the mother say a name. It is possible I heard the mother say do it again please. It is possible I took one step backward to save her the embarrassment of my witness, and in that step I looked into the little window between the darkroom and the print room and saw my own eye where the child's was. In the glass I sometimes see my own not because of any arrangement of mirror and sheet but because I worked there too long. I excused it. Mr. Finch says good assistants marry or drink themselves out of such fancies. I did neither. I lamp-breathed them. When at last I went back in, because you cannot leave a woman alone in such a room even if she believes you capable of delicacy, the lamp was low again and the air was so saturated with us that the varnish bottle had sweat on its shoulders. I told myself the damp was good, that varnish loves a little humidity. The print lay flat on the bench and the mother's palm rested over the child's eyes, and she had that look one gets in church when one is not listening to any clergyman but to a child coughing 2 pews over. She took her hand away and there was the graphite again, the counsel I had put down with the pencil that morning, flashing briefly and then leaving, and this time the action was so plain that I almost said her name aloud while my own mouth closed. I am not immune. I simply know where the trick lies. Knowing is not the same as being protected. We wrapped the print in tissue and slid it into its frame. Mr. Finch appeared at last and said, "Am I charging for this theater?" I said no. He said, "Then I will charge for everything else twice." The optician shook my hand and said, "I would like to draw you a diagram tomorrow of what your light is doing and of what your silver is doing." He drew in the air. A plane here, a convexity here, a layer of varnish like gelatin over a roast, a pencil's carbon sitting in an abrasion. He was the only one among us not inclined to poetry and therefore the only one not ruined by the weeks that followed. The mother came back 3 times for nothing after that, because she had not come for proofs or mounts or a handshake in a corridor. She came to ask me whether the trouble of watching would bring her child's sleep nearer to waking. I told her no, that it was exactly the other way, that watching is what creates the thing. I could not make her understand that her eye is the device that completes the circuit. You will say I was cruel. I tell you I was animal honest. I sat there between the silver bath and the hypo that tells you when your fingernails are full of salt, and I told a woman to stop looking at her dead child if she wished to keep the child safe from her attention's habits. It was a vile thing to say. I said it. She did not return afterward. This is the part where my memory plays tricks that I cannot forgive. I could set down every measurement of the lenses we used that summer, but I cannot tell you if I saw her again at the funeral, or if I only think I did because I imagined what the child would look like under a glass lid in the parlor. I think sometimes I went to her house. It smelled of damp soot where the grates had been banked, and of roses pinned to teak frames so stiff they could not be real. I stood in a room where sheets covered furniture with shapes like old men, and I said I was there to return a plate. I said nothing. I saw a photograph of a man with one eye slightly gummed by silvering, and I wanted to take it away and correct that too. I don't know if I went. I might have sent the optician. The optician, Mr. Rook, came to me at the studio when the fog fell other days without correspondence and said that the glass in mourners' homes was teaching him things that his shop had never taught him. The angle of guilt and the angle of light are cousins, he said once, which is not a sentence I would have expected from a man who knows the formula for silver plating. He drew on paper a cross-section of an albumen print and showed me where the gloss sits, where the gold toning changes the crystalline habit, where the varnish crawls when the room is too hot and stupid. He drew a little mouth of graphite perched like a bird along the top of an eyelid, and he drew a line showing a beam scraping across it, and he drew the beam reflecting twice from the pencil and the varnish in the glass before arriving back to the viewer, and he said there, "That delay you feel in your chest when the blink happens late? That is the time it takes for light to think." He too was becoming unsound by then. I think he had been asked to leave someone's parlor because he had told a child to stop testing his eyes on his dead father's photograph. We tried a dozen conscientious cures. We varnished thinner. We varnished thicker. We avoided pencil and used gum arabic, which gave a softer edge. We avoided the black of the pupil in the print by slightly restraining the exposure there, which resulted in eyes that looked milky. We switched the glass in the frames for a flatter draw, which made the rest of the room look placid and kept the mischief still. We told mothers to keep the prints in a drawer and look at them like ration cards, quickly and with no ceremony. We started a rumor that those who see the blink will die in their sleep, which was low even for us, but it worked as such things do, in fits and with cruelty. The optician suggested making 2 prints with different retouches and then slipping them into a bleached ream and showing that one or the other would blink depending on the lamplight, and in that demonstration one could see that no photograph had a monopoly on the false motion. I tried that once. It helped a single woman. The rest burned me in their eyes because who takes time to teach an ocean? On a day that might have been Thursday or might have been the Sunday I told Mr. Finch I could not count change, the mother returned once more. I know it was her because I felt my throat narrow before the bell had rung. She brought the frame wrapped in an old sheet and said there is something wrong, and I thought for a grotesque moment that she meant with her daughter and not with the picture. She set it down and unwrapped it, and the print upon it had bloomed with a silver mirror so thick upon the pupils that if you held it toward the skylight they went white as fish bellies. "This is what paper does to punish us for breath," I told her softly. She nodded as if I had affirmed her suspicion. She said, "It is worse in the darkroom." I said, "Do not bring it here then." She said, "I do not know where else to take it to shut it up." It was a joke that almost unmade me. The optician came, God bless him, even before I sent for him. He tilted the frame and did the thing with his hand, and because I had done the same dozens of times I could not prevent myself from seeing the graphite and the silver and the glass occlusions and calling them by their names, even as something very old put its mouth to the back of my neck and breathed cold. Nothing moved in the print. I mean that the girl's eyelashes were like stitchery, and the whites were lancet smooth, and the mouth was closed upon itself with the neatness of a threaded hem. I mean that I could take a needle and trace every stroke of my pencil and show you how the brain leaps a gap and calls it motion. Even so, I will not say what it looked like. I will only say that we had made the conditions perfect, and that perfection is the truest horror. In fear, men turn to method or to spirits. We had no spirits we could name. There was a bottle in the cupboard that could have stung grief quiet, but I would not open it because there was cyanide in my fingers and I had a fear of being the cause of someone else's small blue funeral. Method then. We took the print into the darkroom and lay it on the bench, and we took the mirror and angled it, and we measured degrees as if we were cutting timber, and we made diagrams on the back of a ruined mount. We drew where the lamp sat, height of 4 feet, angle of 32 degrees toward the print. We noted the varnish pattern, a subtle crazing that is not visible except when you make the light dance like a little dog. We made then what I would call, if I were a clergyman, an altar. We invited light to do a trick in exactly the way that pleases it. And when the trick came, as it had to, we left the room open for something else to use the aperture we had widened in the world. If you are waiting for an apparition, find another printer. Light can do worse than bodies. The lamp went through a mood then, brightening and contracting in a pattern that one can say is draft and nothing else. The flaming of a gas jet has a cadence, an economy like breathing if one is thinking kindly and like retching if one is not. This cadence has nothing of an eyelid about it. And yet, the bench, this is where language fails me. The bench's varnish had a run in it that I had sanded down and then glossed and thought nothing of. The run caught the light just then and sent a ribbon of brightness across the girl's left eye where I had carved a line in the negative. The ribbon made the carved line seem to appear and vanish, appear and vanish. The mother made the smallest noise you can make and still be animal. In the bath the hypo's surface rippled as if a spoon had grazed it. The optician put his hand on the brass edge of the mirror and the mirror played us a trick. In it we saw the room reversed as ever, and we saw the print reversed, and in that reversal the eye seemed to be the right not the left, and yet the movement was the same because physics respects only its own calendar. I am telling you I know what it was, and I am telling you I did not like being right. Afterwards the mother said a thing that was decent and common and nothing like an invocation. She said, "Thank you for showing me how it is false." She took the frame and put it under her arm and went out through the print room as if she had purchased an apron. The optician stood with me, and we did not sit because men do not sit when they think that they have committed a trespass. He said if you could refrain from drawing on eyelids with quite so much confidence. I said if you could make my glass less alive. He smiled, polite. He was a nice man and I have visited his grave. Now you want the penitent to show his lashes. You want me to confess that I returned to the darkroom at midnight and found the print looking back at me. I did, and it did, but not because she was there. Both because of me. The room is an instrument. Instruments do not comfort you, they repeat the conditions you built. I sat with my palms flat and listened to the fixer abbreviate itself towards sleep, and when I could not bear the small talk of the fluids I took the plate I had ruined with the carved eyelid line and I made one more print. I adjusted nothing, retouched nothing, toned it with a parsimony that would have shamed a man who solved images with gold, and I left it to dry with no pressure so that its gloss would be a bit dull, safer. When at last I turned the lamp back and tilted it, the eye did not blink. Because care is a defense. I want you to hear that. Because care is a defense. What care cannot defend against is the part of your brain that goes into the darkroom with you when you are alone the following night, and the next, and that sees the family of freckles at the corner of a child's eye and remembers too late that you placed them there with retouch in a pattern you had seen once in a mirror upon a living person whose name you should not have carried in. What care cannot cure is the whisper of the hypo when the house is quiet and the dying gas makes the room breathe, saying your name as if it had invented you. I begin where I began to you, the dead do not blink. The blinks are ours and beget themselves like fish in a bucket. The reason we believe otherwise is because the world through glass offers us excuses. A wet plate is wetter than it seems. A head support makes a shape behind a child like an ass's ear, and a retoucher erases it badly, and a mother never forgives a blemish she can comprehend with a fingertip. A little graphite makes a ridge where nothing was, and the lamp finds that ridge like a love letter found because we ought not to have hidden it in that book. A second exposure so shallow that it only writes a second sun in a pupil becomes the memory of motion. A poor drafty looking glass in a blackened house makes 1,000 glances where your eye deserves one. The mind sees this, addled by hunger and light, and it takes a breath and calls that breath a blink. I know. I engineered it and I have been eaten by it, digesting still. I have written this with my wrists sticking to the bench. The smell in here is no longer citrus and ether and glad wicked lamp, but something like a child's sweater that was not dried properly and has sat under the bed through 2 seasons. If there is a grief you can inoculate against, I have not met its prick. If there is a story you can close with a latch, it is not this one. We were men in a year that had no right to insist on ritual. And the only ritual I have left that is not apology is this. I sit here and explain to you as if you were at my elbow, a hand on my shoulder stopping me from tipping the lamp, why the trick works and why the terror remains despite it. The human mind, given a nickel of doubt, will buy a carnival of shivers. If you see the blink, you have been shown how to make it. If you see the blink again, you have helped it. If you see it a third time, go out into the street and put your face in the winter air and count your breaths against the gas jets along the terrace and remember that you have eyelids for a reason and that, with enough care, you can choose not to use them. You still think I have kept something back. I have. I will keep one thing. I will keep the one time I set 2 prints side by side, one with a pencil line and one without, and then went to blow out the lamp, and in the half-second before the room surrendered to the other kind of dark both prints blinked at once. This does not mean what you want it to mean. It means that you should not blow out a lamp in a room where grief thinks it is owed a demonstration. It means that a hand we do not like to name had lingered over my wrist. It means I should have married or drunk or left. I won't. I will be here when you come, and I will have in my drawer a child's portrait that will not misbehave if we are decent. Bring an optician who is not afraid to measure shadows. Bring a mother who is less brave than the one I have told you about. Bring your own eyes. We will lay out the materials, the collodion that stings and skins, the nitrate that takes only what we give it, the cap that becomes the arbiter of your pulse, the developer that will show you where you trembled, the hypo that forgives until it does not, the pencil that should be used like a whisper if at all. We will leave the glass in the window because a flat pane cannot undo a bent heart. And if the room murmurs there while we work, if the bath speaks because we have agitated its surface and it speaks the way liquid speaks in tight corners and names are formed because mouths make them, we will do what men do when their instruments act like company. We will keep our eyes lowered and talk of the weather. If you have listened to me this far, You have done more for my salvation than any priest. Subscribe to this peculiar fellowship and keep the lamp steady with me. The darkroom grows stranger without a witness, and I work better when someone's finger rests on the bell, reminding me not to let my own hand shake upon the cap. If you come back tomorrow, I will show you another trick of light and a better trick of restraint. Until then, breathe through your nose in rooms with varnish, keep your fingers out of silver, and if a child's gaze follows you from the paper, remember, it is only the world blinking through you.